Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us today for session 2, which is stretching. Today we're going to take you through some static but also dynamic stretches that are very specific to us as pole vaulters. And I'm sure you all know how to stretch your glute and hamstring in a regular way, whereas these should provide a little bit more variety to drip into your training here and there. Also, before we start, I just wanted to talk you through mobility versus stability, and this is something that I didn't know, and Scott taught me a while back, and it's that in your body you've got a lot of joints. Some of them require stability. For example, the neck, the knee, and the lower back. You don't really want to be stretching them too much because they provide stability for your body. Whereas there are a few joints, especially for us as pole vaulters, that really need to be mobile. And those are what we're going to work on today. And those are the shoulder, which is pretty self-explanatory, the thoracic, which is middle to upper back, and then the hips. And now when we talk about stretching the hips, that's anything from the top of the thigh leading into the hips. And I would do these stretches. I would kind of pick other stretches that work for me and I feel the best after, and I would drip them into warm-ups before I start pole vaulting, or maybe a little circuit after pole vault, so that when you next come to train, you feel really flexible and mobile. All right, cool, let's get started.
Okay, guys, today we're going to start with a series of stretches for the shoulder. We know as pole vaulters that we've got to get into certain positions that require great shoulder range. So a lot of these exercises that we're going to do today are going to help you with those positions. If you don't have that range, then what happens is you steal it elsewhere, and that can be really detrimental to your health. Right, first one we're going to do. Holly's going to lie on her front with a little piece of pole, and she's going to need a partner for this. So on cue. So she's going to lie fully extended, and her partner is going to grab hold of the pole between her hands, and he's going to pull it away from her to start with. Okay, then he's going to lift it up and wedge it on top of his knees so that Holly is on traction, and obviously her shoulders are extended. Then the partner's going to lean over the pole and apply a little bit of pressure down between her shoulder blades so he increases the stretch on the front of the shoulder. It's gentle pressure, guys. Use feedback from the partner and be very, very careful. Don't crank somebody into a big range that they don't have. It's a nice, gentle stretch. And you probably want to hold this for around 20 seconds. Then once you've done that, gently come off and lower your partner back down to the ground. Perfect. So that's our first shoulder stretch for the front of the shoulder. Now, we're going to do a second exercise for the front of the shoulder, which is working on the same idea, but in a much more dynamic way. So again, we need a partner for this one, and we need a little piece of pole. If you don't have a piece of pole, guys, use a broom handle or a mop or whatever. So Holly's lying on her back this time, and she's going to do what we call dish rocks. And as she dish rocks, she's going to stretch her shoulders by pushing her chest forwards while her partner resists and keeps the pole still. Nicely demoed. Okay, and relax. So hold it about 5 or 6 reps there. You guys could probably do somewhere between 8 and 10 reps of pole dish rocks. That's exercise number 2. Okay, moving on. Exercise number 3. We're going to do a pec stretch on the floor. There's a number of different ways you can do this, but Holly's going to do a lying on a front variation. She extends one arm out to the side straight and turns her thumb towards the ceiling. Then from there, with the other arm bent, she's going to gently push her shoulder upwards, her opposite shoulder, and keep the shoulder that's being stretched as close to the ground as she can. Okay, that will increase the stretch on the front of that shoulder joint and through the pec. She can hold that for up to maybe 20 seconds and then gently come down and relax. And then, of course, she would then do the same on the opposite arm. So keeping the shoulder down and rotating the opposite shoulder up away from the floor. Okay, Hol's going to stand up now, and we're going to do the same kind of idea of stretching those pecs, but with a much more dynamic movement. Okay, Hol, do you need to adjust the camera a little bit so people can see you here? Or perfect. Okay, so our standing dynamic arm swings. We're going to start with open and closes horizontally. So Hol's just going to be opening and closing, wrapping herself up, and then stretching her hands back as far as she can, staying in, keeping her hands in line with her shoulders. She does one under and then one over, so we work both sides, okay, and relax. Perfect. So you might want to do somewhere around 10 to 15 reps of under and over horizontals. And then the second variation on that theme is we're going to do it vertically. So hopefully Hol's ceiling is high enough. If not, you'll have to do this in the garden. So she's opening and closing vertically, pushing one hand downwards and backwards and one hand upwards and backwards in an alternating fashion, really dynamically stretching out the front of the shoulder. Okay, Hol, we need to drop the camera back down to the ground now. Boom. Perfect. Okay, so 5th stretch for the shoulder. We're going to do a stretch that incorporates the lat muscle a little bit more now, so the back of the shoulder. And Holly's going to take a kneeling stance with a bit of a spread, so you can see what she's doing there, and she's going to go forwards into this, this particular pose here. Then she's going to take one arm across her body, and she's going to pin it down with the opposite hand into the floor so that it can't move, and then she's going to pull back against it. You won't be able to see her doing that, but what she's trying to do is pull her shoulder back away from her hand, and that will create a big stretch in this situation down her left lat. Okay, then she's going to go across to the other side with the opposite arm, pin it, and then pull back against it. And she's really trying to pull back with her whole body against her hand without her hand moving. Again, those you can hold for about 20 seconds, guys. Get a nice deep stretch through that lat. That's going to give your shoulder much more scope for movement. Okay, and the last one for shoulder, we're going to do shoulder walks. Okay, so Holly is going to be standing again, and she's going to put one palm up towards the ceiling and one palm down towards the ground, and she's going to stretch and create as much distance as she can between one hand and the other, and then she's going to walk forwards and do the same on the opposite side, and just keep repeating that. Pushing up as far as she can is the key. That again dynamically stretches that lat through the top arm. Perfect. Nice. So we've got a series of stretches there, guys, for the shoulder that should, over time, if you're doing this regularly, give yourself a bit more space and a bit more movement to work through that shoulder joint. So next series, unless Hol, did you want to say anything about the shoulder before we move on, or have I covered it?
I think just a lot of people underestimate how important the shoulders are, especially when you're a pole vaulter. So I tend to try and keep on top of this as much as I can, especially because I've had a few shoulder problems. So I think as a pole vaulter, don't neglect your shoulders. They're really, really important.
Yeah, it's a great message. And just one other thing from me, guys, on the shoulder is, yes, Holly's right. Mobility is super important. You've got to have that range there. Otherwise, like I said earlier, you will steal it elsewhere. But once you've got the range, you've got to create strength through that range as well. Because if you have big range, but you're not strong in it, then you're vulnerable to injury. So once you've got the range, then you've got to create strength through that range as well. Anyway, that's for another day. Let's move on. Thoracic mobility. So as Holly said earlier, that's for the mid to upper back. And we're going to do a bunch of different stretches to kind of give you a bit more thoracic range. The first one, everybody's kind of heard of, I'm sure, is going to be sad cat, happy cat. So Holly's going to round out her back and then arch. As she's rounding out, she's tucking her chin in and trying to create a nice, smooth, segmental kind of progression and curve through her spine, especially in that mid back. And then as she drops through and lifts her head, she's trying to create an arch. Don't worry too much about the lower back, guys. This is all about the mid back. So that's got to be the area of focus. And it's a nice smooth transition from one to the other. Okay, you want to probably hit about 10 reps of that. Cool, next progression. Hol's going to lie on her side with her knees bent at 90 degrees and her feet roughly in line with her spine, okay? Then from that position, she's got both her arms extended out in front of her with her arms straight. And from there, she's going to take a really smooth sweep, not too fast, and just rotate onto her back, trying to keep her knees together and as close to the ground as she can. And then she's going to come back and she's going to just repeat that, keeping her knees down, knees together, and really opening up through that thoracic spine. And then she comes back. One more. Arm stays straight. She rolls onto her back, keeping her top hip forwards. That's cued up by keeping the knees together and the knees down to the ground. Great stuff. All right, exercise number 3 is going to be a seated thoracic rotation with some breathing exercises as well, guys. So Holly's going to be sat down. You can do this on a chair or you can do this on the ground. Doesn't really matter because that keeps your pelvis pointing forwards. It keeps your pelvis neutral and it focuses your attention on your mid back. Now she's got her arms folded, and what she's going to do is she's going to rotate in one direction as far as she can with her hips pointing forwards. When she reaches end range, she's going to stop there for a few seconds, and then she's going to take a really deep breath in, let it go, and then try and rotate a little further. And there you go. We've got a bit more range in there. And then she's going to wait there for 5 seconds, And then she's going to repeat. Deep breath in, let it go. See if she can find a touch more. It's great. And you probably want to repeat that, guys, about 3 times in total. So you end up doing about 15 to 20 seconds worth of thoracic rotation. Then, of course, Holly would repeat that then on the other side. But I think we're going to do it? No, we got it. We know what we're doing. We know what we're doing. All right. We're going to go back to the position that we used a minute ago, lying on the side for the next variation. And this time, rather than just doing opening and closing, we're going to do sweeps. So it's the same intention, guys, but this time the top hand has got to stay in contact with the ground all the way around. And back. Awesome. Really good. And again, knees staying down and connected with the ground, fingers in contact with the ground, rotating all the way around. So we've actually got a bit of thoracic and a bit of shoulder on this one, guys, which is great. HB, can you do one more? So she's in contact with the ground all the way around, keeping in contact, if she can, reaching all the way around to parallel. Great exercise. And the last one then for thoracic, guys, Holly's going to take a 4-point kneeling stance, which we call being quadruped. And then what she's going to do is, to start with, she's going to put her fingertips on her temple, and she's going to push her elbow underneath her body. And then she's going to come back and reach as high as she can with her elbow. Coming in, and then reaching as high as you can. HB, do the next variation with a straight arm underneath. So push your hand underneath this time. So she's reaching as far as she can, coming up and extending and reaching her hand. And one more. Hand goes as far underneath as possible, comes up and reaches, keeping the other hand in contact with the ground at all times and keeping great back posture. Really good. Love it. So a couple of variations there, guys, a bent arm and a straight arm variation on the arm unders. Okay, HB, any comments from you?
Not really, no. Obviously, the thoracic spine is really important, and I think, especially on that first one, the sad cat, happy cat, it's really easy to focus on your lower back, and I think just being mindful of the position in your back where you're working, and that's what I kind of find really useful is when I'm doing these stretches is really focus on where am I meant to be feeling this, and that'll help you target it.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. In pole vault, guys, we see a lot of low back injuries. A lot of stress goes through the lower back. It's a vulnerable area. We see a lot of issues there. So if you can work on increasing your thoracic mobility, then you will actually help your lower back, because your body will take the range from where it's supposed to take it instead of stealing it from your lower back and making your lower back vulnerable to injuries. All right, last one today. We're going to look at the hips. Okay, we're going to start with a plank position. And then Holly is going to do an alternating glute stretch in and out, but not holding for too long, just a couple of seconds. Then she's going to switch back and then bring the other leg through. So it's important that you externally rotate your hip here, guys, which means putting your foot inside of the stretch. You can see when Holly comes back to us in a minute, she puts her foot inside and then she sits down onto her glute with her ankle, knee, and ideally her hip in contact with the ground, and you should feel a nice stretch through your butt when you do this. Okay, that's our alternating glute stretch. 2 to 3 seconds on each side, maybe 10 reps in total. All right, next one. We're going to do a knee to chest straight leg raise alternating. So Hol's going to lie on her back. She's going to have one leg bent and on the ground for stability, and then the other leg is going to be the working leg. And she's going to start with a knee to chest and then a straight leg raise. Knee to chest, straight leg raise. So we're working a lot of hip flexion here, guys, but alternating between a flexed knee and a straight knee. And all the work and all the action is happening at the hip joint there into hip flexion, which we know we need for both running and jumping. Okay, we're going to go back to our plank position, but this time, instead of stretching the glute, which is the back of the hip, we're going to stretch the front of the hip. And this is a stretch for the back leg this time, not the front leg. So Holly's putting herself into a big range of movement there with the foot outside of her hand. And once she's done that, she's pushing her hips down towards the floor, opening up the hip of the back leg into hip extension. So she's stretching the front of the hip there, those hip flexors, she's stretching them right out by pushing herself into extension. Boom. Perfect. So that's alternating plank lunges. Okay, next one. Rather than doing flexion extension, we're going to do some movement away from the center line of the body. So we're going to do an exercise called bounce outs and crossovers. This is a dynamic mobility exercise. So this is Holly doing bounce outs. Her knees are together and she's just rhythmically bouncing her heels outwards away from her knees, and that's creating a rotation in the hip joint. Then next progression, if she puts her knees apart a little bit this time, about level with her hips, and she crosses over, alternating from one side to the other, she's then creating a rotation at the hip in the opposite direction. And we need to give ourselves good internal and external hip rotation. We need that range. So that's a dynamic mobility exercise for that movement. Okay. Plank again, we're going to go back to the plank, and this time we're going to add an overhead sweep into the plank. So we're going to be doing this exercise again for hip extension. Holly puts her foot inside her hands this time. And then once she's got her foot inside her hand and she's balanced, she takes her hands off and does a big overhead sweep. Try and keep your abs braced when you do this, guys. As Holly said earlier, this isn't about stretching the lower back. This is about stretching the hip. So hold your abs tight. That'll stabilize your lumbar spine, or your lower back, sorry, and it'll allow your hip to really feel the stretch. You should feel it in the front of your hip, not in your back when you do that exercise. Okay, so that's our plank overhead sweeps, again, for the front of the hip, working into hip extension. And the last one we're going to do for the hips is actually a hip flow series, and there's lots of different variations that you can do on this, guys. So just get experimental, get creative, and come up with your own ideas. But Holly's going to take you through one of her own hip flow series. So she's rotating from one glute stretch to the other, keeping the trunk upright. Then she's adding in a little hip extension by raising up onto the shin of the front leg. You can see that her knees and her hips are generally at about 90 degrees. She's rotating and then lifting. And she can add in a glute stretch to that. She can add in a hip extension to that, all sorts of different kind of variations on a theme, but with a hip flow series, both directions. You can do that for probably 30 seconds to a minute if you wanted to, or for a number of reps. And that's our hip flexibility series. I'm going to pass back to Holly now to pass any further comments on the hips and then wrap up for the day. Thanks, guys. See you soon.
Thanks, Scott. For me, the hips are really important. A lot of pole vaulters suffer with low back issues, and I think having suffered from low back issues, keeping your hips, glutes, hip flexors at the front, really like mobile is really, really important and key to helping with lower back pain or avoiding low back pain. So I would just say the shoulder, thoracic, and hips. Pick the ones that you like, and then add them into warm-ups, cool downs here and there, just so you've constantly got a little bit of those specific flexibilities in there. So yeah, thanks so much for joining us. Next week we are going to do, well, we're going to try and come up with as many pole vault specific drills that you can do in the house as you can. What I would say the only equipment you're going to need is something that resembles this. So whether it's a cut piece of pole, a broom, a mop, anything that you can pick up that resembles a pole, because what's really important during this time is you just keep your mind active on how you hold a pole. And there's actually some really cool drills that we can do in the house which stimulates the pole vault. So join us next Friday, and I look forward to telling you all about that. Thank you.